Welcome to the Lovability Podcast. My name is Jennifer Stiers, and I'm here to talk love, relationships, sex, marriage, and everything in between. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Lovability Show. So glad all of you are here. We started just a couple minutes early with letting you know we'd be here, and so we've got a nice little start of some people already waiting for the show, which is good because that means that we've got people that are going to participate today. We do have a pretty hot topic today. I mean, toxic relationships, toxic love. I mean, it's everywhere. I think the hardest part of what we're going to talk about today is there are so many toxic people running around, men and women, that don't even know it. And I hope today that we shed some light on what this looks like, and if there is a place where maybe you can relate, because nobody had a perfect childhood. And typically where toxic relationships come from, where the root of where they come from is our childhood. And so any needs that were left unmet, any wounds we have or trauma show up in our adult relationships until we heal them. And keeping until we heal them. Having said that, even when we heal them, we still have to remain very, very conscious as we're moving through our relationships as to triggers. And, I find that as a coach, matchmaker, I've seen those triggers, hit and what happens. And even after somebody's done the work, they thought they were healed until all of a sudden it's like ripe and open. And the best part about that is in our adult relationships, when those wounds show up, it does give us an opportunity to heal them. So there is hope in all of this in the end. So let's see if we can open this up. Let me see who's on here and say hello to everybody. All right. So would love for you guys to say hello. I know you're watching. There's comments. All right. So what I'd love for you to do today, because we're going to have a nice crowd today. I'd love for you guys to, number one, say hello. That would be nice. And then other things I'd like you to do is comment along the way. If you have thoughts, opinions, feelings about this, even if you agree or disagree, that's okay. I want this to be a discussion. And this is the best part is you guys get free coaching. So that's kind of the fun part about all of this is you get free coaching if you take advantage of it, and we can actually use this as a platform for that. Hey, Eric. Hey, Martha. Hey, Lori. Great to see you guys. Some of my favorite people here. All right. Well, let's start talking about the origins of toxic love. So like I had said, they're childhood wounds. And it's neat when I may have people watching and listening that have coached with me before. And we've worked through some of these. Some of these we're aware of, some of them we're not. Some of them you have to dig a little deeper to find them. I was just talking to a young lady the other day, and we were we were trying to go through. Sometimes when you look at your childhood and you look at your relationship with your mom and dad, who, you start describing your parents, you start describing how you grew up. I ask people a lot of times, how did they know that their mom loved them or their dad loved them? And that's where you'll see a lot of these wounds pop up with people, because when it really comes down to it and you dig deep enough, how you were loved by each parent is it turns into how we love and how we seek love, how we give love, and how we perceive love as adults. So it's definitely a really good exercise. If you have never done it before, it's a really good exercise to do, to at least start this process off, because you may uncover some wounds you have that you didn't even know you had. But it's those things, how did you know you were loved? If love was withheld, that's one of the ways in which toxic love in adulthood starts, is if love was withheld from you from either parent. And it matters what parent and what the sex is of each person, because, a dad withholding love from a son is a very different thing than a mom withholding love from a son, and vice versa with a young lady. Guys, I will tell you, I put a post up the other day about toxic women destroy, good men, and they only destroy you if you let them, guys. So I gave you guys a lot of rope on that. It's true. There's a lot of toxic women out there, and a lot of toxic women are toxic because they had bad relationships with their dad. So I've told you a million times on this show, you should always ask a woman what her relationship is with her dad and what it was like growing up, because it will tell you a lot about who she is and any wounds that she has. A woman that doesn't have a good relationship with her dad, or had a strained relationship, or was abandoned by her father, there's definitely something underneath there. Whether, my question would be in my head, whether they've worked on it or not. So super important for you guys to know. But I did find it interesting when we were going through this the other day with the post about the guys and the wounded women, and how some of the guys would jump aboard and they'd say, yeah, I have been wounded, and there are toxic women out there, but guys, you can't forget that you attracted them. And for those of you that continually attract them, there's wounds there. That's you. It's not just them. It's that, toxic, tie that you end up having to each other, and trying to work each other's wounds out. Those are the most toxic relationships that exist. I know I was just chatting with Chris, my producer, about this ahead of time, and he was talking to me about a couple friends that he's had that had really toxic and dangerous relationships, and it definitely, we definitely are talking that some of these can be borderline dangerous when we have a toxic background or a toxic childhood, or were neglected, abused. Abused is a big one, because people that were abused tend to repeat patterns and seek out abuse because abuse was love. And I know it sounds so crazy, but that is real. I am going to jump here real quick. Lori says, what about relationship with mom? If mom didn't show any affection to children? Lori, that's a really important one. And I'll just use that in general for guys and girls. When a mother's love is that nurturing love, that support, that caring, that, that warmth. And when that love is withheld from a man and a woman, both, they're lacking that nurturing. And I'll see women sometimes, Lori, that didn't have a mom figure, and they don't exude a lot of warmth. If their mom wasn't warm to them, where do we learn to be? Where do we learn to be women and to be feminine? We learn from our mom. If our mom didn't have it, we don't have it. We don't have any tools to go by. And so, or if it's the opposite, like in my case, I had a very nurturing mom. And so I have a very nurturing spirit. And you can go overboard with that too, though, because that very nurturing spirit can turn into codependency if you've got an over nurturing, family or a mother. So, but if mom didn't show any affection, how that affects kids. The girls don't know how to show it. So as women, you show up to relationships and you don't really know how to show or express your feelings because they weren't taught. Moms, another things mom do that are key, because there's a million, but I think where they show up in relationships is that encouragement. I tend to find that people that didn't have a mother figure, a really strong mother figure, and had that support, they tend to not really know who they are. They don't really know their strengths, because I think your mom is that person that says, you're so good at this, and you're so smart, and you're so pretty, or you do this so well. And nurturing moms have that gift, and that is, that's just by nature a nurturing component. And so I tend to find that people that didn't have a strong mother figure tend to have a lower sense of self-identity too, whether that be a man or a woman. It goes for both. Now, I will say, from a man's perspective, when the mother figure is missing or not really active in their life, they tend to seek out first that very nurturing nature in a woman that they didn't have. They usually end up with cold women. It's so weird how the subconscious works. So they tend sometimes to get drawn into narcissistic women. So these are the guys that find the narcissistic women that love bomb them and show them affection at first, and then later go to withhold it. So if you're hearing this as a guy and you've ended up with narcissistic women, this could be why, because you're drawn to something that you need on the outside, but on the inside, they don't really possess it. So it's it's a fine line. That's why men and women both get involved in narcissistic relationships with, the opposite sex, is because of sometimes a wound that's back there. They're drawn into the love bombing portion of the narcissist. And then afterwards they turn into the parent that they weren't close to or that was abusive. So it's kind of crazy. It's probably relating to some of you now. You're kind of getting it. Light bulbs going off, I'm sure. So let's talk about common reasons why people are toxic. I have my list because, as you know, I can talk and get off on tangents. So I just want to make sure that I hit enough of these things so you can identify. Low self-esteem or fear of being alone. These are reasons we can be drawn into toxic relationships. When people that don't want to be alone or can't be alone because they're insecure, they will take anybody toxic, and toxic people are drawn to them because toxic people know that person is insecure and they know they can control them. And so therefore, it works both ways. That which you are seeking is also seeking you for their own reasons as well. So unhealthy patterns from childhood. So just remember, how you were loved is how you will perceive love. What was missing is what you will seek typically. Now, granted, there are always those people that go, oh, well, my parents were very abusive, and so I've made a point to be very loving to my children and do the opposite. It doesn't cure the wound. Just because you're responding differently to your children doesn't mean that the wound is healed. It just means that you made a decision when you were growing up that you weren't going to do that. And that's great. Because at least it breaks that generational pattern, but underneath it all, that wound is still there. So you got to deal with that. You can't be afraid to go there and deal with what's underneath there. So misplaced ideals of love and acceptance. This is, this is a little bit harder to identify, but When parents show love in other ways. So, for example, if love is tied to your beauty, or love is tied to your success or your grades or your, how good you do in school, or how good you are in sports. Again, just little examples, but misplaced love based on things that really don't matter can also cause you to seek out the wrong partners in your adulthood. So if you had a pattern of trying to please your parents, and the only way you got shown love and affection and got praise from your parents was when you did something good, got a good grade, stood out, had some kind of recognition or attention, that may be what you do as an adult and in a relationship, and what you need in order to get that, seeking that same thing, because that was love to you. So when it's misplaced and it looks a little different than what love should be, because it's placed in a different area or on something that really doesn't have value or matter, that can also change your perception of what love is. It's complicated, isn't it? Manipulation and control tactics employed by toxic partners. So yes, as an adult, you can get misguided by toxic partners. I still think there's a component in you that is going to allow for that. There's still a component in you that says yes to it, that is drawn to it. So regardless if you're attracting toxic, there's something in you that needs to heal still. So it's still about you. We still don't want to point the finger outward. So hi, Jamie. Good to see you. Great to see familiar faces here. And again, make sure that you guys ask any questions. It's really important to me that you get your needs met today. So let's talk about what contributes to unhealthy relationships. So we talked about lack of love and validation, growing up without receiving sufficient love. And here's what I want you guys to listen for. I'm getting in a little more detail now because I want you to hear you in all of this, right? Because we'll get later to toxic relationships and how to get out of them and what to do. But the bigger part of all of this, which is why I'm spending so much time on it, is how do you recognize it in yourself? Because it all starts with you, what you attract and what you allow in your life. It's one thing if you attract it or if somebody else attracts it. I have a friend that I love to pieces, and he always attracts toxic women, and we've talked about it. And because he attracts toxic women, then I end up, if I ever hang out with him with other people, I end up in the presence of a bunch of toxic women, which I can't stand. And then I have to separate myself, right? So it's learning how to have boundaries around, when they come around, because there are plenty of them. You have to be able to recognize it and be able to learn how to protect yourself. And you do need to protect yourself, because that is a frightening, can be a very frightening thing, to be honest, whether it be a man or woman. So Jen says, I found my issue with seeing their toxicity as normal, so I isolated rather than be exposed to it. Okay. Again, when you grow up in a toxic environment, I'm not sure I understood the last part, which is why I paused. When you grow up in a toxic environment, chaotic, drama, abuse, insults, which I was about to get to, those things become normal. They can even be seen as love, believe it or not, if that was how those were your parental figures, or partner figures, right? People that you were in a relationship with. But that all stems back to you. So if you saw toxic as normal, then there's something toxic in you that you need to look at, if you haven't already, to say, why did I think this was normal? And look at the behaviors that were toxic and say, where did I see and feel and experience these behaviors in childhood? That's what needs to be healed right there. But that's what people do is when they have those wounds show up, they see them, it feels normal, because in homes where people grew up with abuse, with physical, verbal abuse, insults, could, those kind of things matter too, because that's mental abuse, verbal abuse. They tend to see that as normal and crazy. Like, guys, you may find women. This is where the women come in, and I say women more than men, although men do it too, where they bring in the drama, right? Because they're toxic. They grew up in a very chaotic home. And so what they operate best in is in chaos. So when everything's peaceful, if you're healthy, you like peace. And then all of a sudden, things keep erupting, and they're created by the toxic person, and it's out of left field for you, because it's not something you recognize as love and as normal. But sometimes as you're getting in a relationship and you start seeing who somebody is, that's a red flag, because they're constantly creating drama or chaos in the relationship, because that's what they understand, and that's how they know how to function, and that's how they know how to get the love that they need, sadly, the affirmation they need, or whatever. So they'll act out to create that childhood environment for them, in the meantime creating a toxic environment for you. So you isolated rather than be exposed to it. I don't know if that means that you isolated in the future, meaning didn't go out with other people, or you isolated from that person or retreated. Which can happen is you numb yourself. Like, all of a sudden you turn into, a doormat, because you don't want to, you're tiptoeing around somebody. You don't want to tick them off. You don't want to make them, upset at you. So your behavior and who you are changes because of their actions. And this, a lot of times it can creep in too, because when you get early on in a relationship and you're trying to make each other happy, it happens that you just kind of sweep it under the rug because you don't understand it at first. And you're like, okay, I didn't see that coming. Well, let me, smooth this over. And then it happens again. When you start seeing the patterns of that, that's when it's a problem. And it's important that you do something about it and not isolate, or numb yourself, or become that doormat where you're ignoring it, because it is in that time that the most abuse happens in a relationship to the person that's on the receiving end. So Martha says, how does someone know if they are healed from something in their past? Martha, the only way you'll know, and it's a really good question, I think we can feel healed because we can feel a sense of peace and understanding about something. So that's when we kind of get on the other side of it. And it's like, okay, I know why they did that, or I know why I feel this way, or I know why I'm seeking out these kind of people. So you have this understanding, and you're able to extend grace to maybe person that hurt you, or abusers, or whatever, right? There's a healing that comes from that. But how do you know when you've really healed is when you're able to stand up and step away from it. So when you're able to put boundaries up, recognize it right away, and step away from it. That's the powerful part, is that you have to, you have to know when if something's hit a trigger, or, because it's all about your healing. When somebody triggers you, you understanding, like, I've got a choice here. This isn't okay. This behavior isn't right. It doesn't feel good. I've got a choice to make, and I need to make it. And you stand up for yourself. Every time you do that, every time you stand in your healing, stand in your knowledge of what you know, stand in the knowledge and wisdom of what you've learned, that is what ultimately heals you. It's like working a muscle. Best way to say it, it's like working a muscle. Once you've worked it enough, and but you have to be triggered. People always think just because they've gone through therapy or counseling that they're healed. No, you're not. You're healed when you recognize, because it's all about that awareness. When you recognize what's bothering you, or what is damaging, or what's toxic, and being able to move past it and away from it, that's healing. So I hope that answered that. Jim, gosh, I haven't seen you in a while. Great to see you back. Jim says, hi, Jennifer. Have you ever been able to identify some clear toxicity flags that can be detected early without needing to find out a number of months down the line? You know what? Yes, I'm going to go through that right now, and no. And the reason I say that is because I think the big ones we get and we should be able to recognize. But sometimes people don't show you who they are right away. And so sometimes, like I'll use the narcissistic relationship, for example. Some of these narcissists are really, really good at showing you what they know you need. They know how to manipulate. And I hate to say it, but I don't even think they even do it consciously. I think some of it's conscious, but some of it's not. It's just all they know. It's how they were loved and how they love, and it's how their brain's wired. And you may not know it until you're down the road and you start seeing signs of it. And that's why it's so important that if you have been in a narcissistic relationship, and most of us have at this point in our life, that you are very aware of what those signs are and how to recognize them and get out. Let's see. Trauma and abuse. We've gone through neglect, role modeling, recognizing signs. Let me give you some here. So some signs, Jim, would be somebody who lacks trust. Meaning they don't trust you from the get-go. I hear this all the time. They don't trust you from the get-go. They question where you're going. They question who you're with. They question your intentions because they're insecure. Somebody like that doesn't trust, that is a toxic, wounded person, right? So whether they don't trust because they're insecure, or they don't trust because they're projecting what they're doing on you, which is the case also. We can't forget about that. So that would be one. Excessive control. Don, I see you. I am going to get to you in just a second. I'm glad you made it. Excessive control. So a controlling relationship. So somebody that criticizes, belittle, humiliates you, erodes your self-esteem, doesn't build you up. That controlling too is these people that get in these relationships and are isolated. So narcissists are really good at this, even though we're not talking about narcissism. I'm doing it a lot today. They will isolate their person. So they will isolate you from friends, isolate you from family, and that's their way to control. So they'll get you to a point where and gosh, I've seen this to extremes where they'll turn you away from your family, make you think or see or feel bad, horrible things about them that may or may not exist. So it's really, really important that you see and feel, because when you're being isolated, when you're being controlled, because it feels like you're walking on eggshells. I don't know how else to explain that in a better way, but it feels like you're walking on eggshells. And nobody wants to be in that relationship where they're feeling like they can't be themselves, or they're going to say the wrong thing, or do the wrong thing, or dress the wrong way, whatever it may be. That's an element of control, and that's something you want to look out for sure. I do not want to leave out Don here. He joined us because he had a really good question the other day on my post, maybe it was yesterday. I feel at times I've tried to communicate and clearly discuss what's important to both of us in our relationship boundaries, but felt later our discussions on boundaries, sometimes it didn't matter. Okay, so you get in and you try to discuss what's important on boundaries, and later the boundaries are broken, or it isn't what you need, and what you've communicated isn't respected, I'm guessing. So that is a sign that you're dealing with somebody that's meeting their own needs and not really in a partnership and caring about yours. It's a red flag for sure. I love that you talked about boundaries. I love that you discuss it, that I mean, the only place you can come from is what your boundaries are. And we should be communicating our boundaries up front. Ladies, I know one of the things that, were areas where women tend to be weaker is in saying no to men. Or telling them what their boundaries are. I would love to go out with you, but if you message me at the last minute and I've got plans, I'm not really comfortable changing them. So I'd appreciate it if you could just let me know, ahead of time. Or I'm not comfortable with you touching me that way on a first date, right? I'm not comfortable with you talking to me or making comments like this to me right off the bat. Inappropriate comments, which, I hate to say it, but men do it and women do it. I hear it from men too, that women cross the line really early. I find that men don't have a problem if they don't want the advances saying, I'm not comfortable with this, or this is not something I'm going to do, or a place I'm going to go with you. So men tend to be a little bit more comfortable communicating about their boundaries where women may not. But if somebody ignores your discussion about boundaries, then they don't really respect you, Dawn. So there we go. Donna, I would love some clarity when you said you feel at times I've tried to communicate clearly, discuss what is important to both of us and our relationship boundaries. Are you saying that you're asking her, like, tell me what your boundaries are? And the reason I'm asking that, because it's great that you're in touch with yours and if you're not getting a healthy discussion out of that and she can't answer that, she doesn't know what her boundaries are, there's a red flag for you. So I feel like that's just important, because I'm not sure exactly, because we're doing this in Messenger and it's not always the easiest to maybe understand the context of your message. But I do feel like that's really, really important to say that. If you ask somebody what their boundaries are and they can't communicate them, they don't have them, right? So very important. Lori says toxic and narcissism are partners usually. Toxic and narcissism are partners usually. Yes, they are. Narcissists are always toxic, not usually, but always. So, yes. So Nancy says very true. Or they try to turn your family against you. And that is very true. It's super important that you get into a relationship and you protect your life. You protect who you are, and you have to know who you are, but you always protect who you are and what you value and what's important to you. Your partner is supposed to complement those things and not contradict those things or combat you on those things. So it's super important that you come in and you keep your support system. I wish somebody would have told me that when I was younger. Lessons we learn, we've all learned them. But knowing who we are and standing in that identity is so important, and not letting anybody isolate you, because anybody that's controlling, that's going to be their first line where they go, is they will slowly but surely dwindle away your support system, because ultimately they want you to depend on